Fakir Chand. Lesson 3. Fakir's mother showed herself outside the hut and, addressing the princess, said in a winning tone, "Come, my child, thou queen of beauty, come to me, and I will help you to bathe." So saying, she approached the princess, who, seeing that it was only a woman, made no resistance. The old woman, while in the act of washing the hair of the princess, noticed the bright jewel in her hand and said, "Put the jewel here till you are bathed." In a moment the jewel was in the possession of Fakir's mother, who wrapped it up in the cloth that was round her waist. Knowing the princess to be unable to escape, she gave the signal to the attendants in waiting, who rushed to the tank and made the princess a captive. Great were the rejoicings of the people when the tidings reached the city that Fakir's mother had captured a water nymph from the nether regions. The whole city came to see the daughter of the immortals, as they called the princess. When she was brought to the palace and confronted with the Raja's son of obscured intellect, the latter said with a shout of exultation, "I have found. I have found." The cloud which had settled on his brain was dissipated in a moment. The eyes, erewhile vacant and lusterless, now glowed with the fire of intelligence. His tongue, of which he had almost lost the use, the only words which he used to utter being, now here, now gone, was now relaxed. In a word, he was restored to his senses. The joy of the Raja knew no bounds. There was great festivity in the city, and the people who showered benedictions on the head of Fakir Chand's mother expected the speedy celebration of the marriage of the Raja's son with the beauty of the netherworld. The princess, however, told the Raja, through Fakir's mother, that she had made a vow to the effect that she would not, for 1 whole year, look at the face of another man than that of her husband who was dwelling beneath the waters, and that therefore the marriage could not be performed during that period. Though the Raja's son was somewhat disappointed, he readily agreed to the delay, believing, agreeably to the proverb, that delay would greatly enhance the sweetness of those pleasures which were in store for him. It is scarcely necessary to say that the princess spent her days and her nights in sorrowing and sighing. She lamented that idle curiosity which had led her to come to the upper world, leaving her husband below. When she recollected that her husband was all alone below the waters, she wept bitter tears. She wished she could run away. But that was impossible, as she was immured within walls, and there were walls within walls. Besides, if she could get out of the palace and of the city, of what avail would it be? She could not gain her husband, as the serpent jewel was not in her possession. The ladies of the palace and Fakir's mother tried to divert her mind, but in vain. She took pleasure in nothing. She would hardly speak to anyone. She wept day and night. The year of her vow was drawing to a close, and yet she was disconsolate. The marriage, however, must be celebrated. The Raja consulted the astrologers, and the day and the hour in which the nuptial knot was to be tied were fixed. Great preparations were made. The confectioners of the city busied themselves day and night in preparing sweetmeats. Milkmen took contracts for supplying the palace with tanks of curds. Gunpowder was being manufactured for a grand display of fireworks. Bands of musicians were placed on sheds erected over the palace gate. Whoever and anon sent forth many, about of linked sweetness, and the whole city assumed an air of mirth and festivity. It is time we should think of the minister's son, who, leaving his friend in the subterranean palace, had gone to his country to bring horses, elephants, and attendants for the return of the king's son and his lovely princess with due pomp. The preparations took him many months, and when everything was ready he started on his journey, accompanied by a long train of elephants, horses, and attendants. He reached the tank 2 or 3 days before the appointed day. Tents were pitched in the mango topes adjoining the tank for the accommodation of men and cattle, and the minister's son always kept his eyes fixed on the tank. The sun of the appointed day sank below the horizon, but the prince and the princess dwelling beneath the waters made no sign. He waited 2 or 3 days longer. Still the prince did not make his appearance. What could have happened to his friend and his beautiful wife? Were they dead? Had another serpent, possibly the mate of the one that had died, beaten the prince and the princess to death? Had they somehow lost the serpent jewel? Or had they been captured when they were once on a visit to the upper world? Such were the reflections of the minister's son. He was overwhelmed with grief. Ever since he had come to the tank, he had heard at regular intervals the sound of music coming from the city, which was not distant. He inquired of passers-by what that music meant. He was told that the Raja's son was about to be married to some wonderful young lady who had come out of the waters of that very tank on the bank of which he was now seated, and that the marriage ceremony was to be performed on the day following the next. The minister's son immediately concluded that the wonderful young lady of the lake that was to be married was none other than the wife of his friend, the king's son. He resolved, therefore, to go into the city to learn the details of the affair and try if possible to rescue the princess. He told the attendants to go home, taking with them the elephants and the horses, and he himself went to the city and took up his abode in the house of a Brahmin. After he had rested and taken his dinner, the minister's son asked the Brahmin what the meaning was of the music that was heard in the city at regular intervals. The Brahmin asked, "From what part of the world have you come that you have not heard of the wonderful circumstance that a young lady of heavenly beauty rose out of the waters of a tank in the suburbs, and that she is going to be married the day after tomorrow to the son of our Raja?" Minister's son: "No, I have heard nothing. I have come from a distant country whither the story has not reached. Will you kindly tell me the particulars?" Brahmin: "The Raja's son went out a-hunting about this time last year. He pitched his tents close to a tank in the suburbs. One day, while the Raja's son was walking near the tank, he saw a young woman, or rather goddess, of uncommon beauty rise from the waters of the tank. She gazed about for a minute or two and disappeared. The Raja's son, however, who had seen her, was so struck with her heavenly beauty that he became desperately enamored of her. Indeed, so intense was his passion that his reason gave way, and he was carried home hopelessly mad. The only words he uttered day and night were, 'Now here, now gone.' The Raja sent for all the best physicians of the country for restoring his son to his reason, but the physicians were powerless. At last he caused a proclamation to be made by beat of drum to the effect that if anyone could cure the Raja's son, he should be the Raja's son-in-law and the owner of half his kingdom. An old woman, who went by the name of Fakir's mother, took hold of the drum and declared her ability to cure the Raja's son. On the tank where the princess had appeared was raised for Fakir's mother a hut in which she took up her abode, and not far from her hut another hut was erected for the accommodation of attendants who might be required to help her. It seems the goddess rose from the waters. Fakir's mother seized her with the help of the attendants and carried her in a palki to the palace. At the sight of her, the Raja's son was restored to his senses, and the marriage would have been celebrated at that time, but for a vow which the goddess had made that she would not look at the face of any male person till the lapse of a year. The year of the vow is now over, and the music which you have heard is from the gate of the Raja's palace. This, in brief, is the story.